Hello, everyone, and on behalf of the Department of Justice, welcome to this webinar titled Application Mechanics, Submitting an Application. At this point, we have approximately 250 attendees with us today, and we are really glad that you're here. Our hope is that you're able to leave at the end of today's session with a solid understanding of the steps you need to take to submit an application for DOJ funding using Grants.gov and our new grants management system, the JustGrants system, otherwise known as JustGrants. My name is Chris Cotton, and I'm a part of DOJ's JustGrants team. At this point, I'm going to turn the session over to Stacy, and she is going to review the specific topics we'll cover today and start leading us through our content. I'll be back in a little while as we start addressing questions and the Q&A components of today's session. Stacy, I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Stacy Kernison, and today on the call, I have my colleague with me, Lisa Hartman, who will help me demonstrate to you all how to walk through the application process. The purpose of today's discussion is to learn more about JustGrants in relation to the mechanics of applying. We want to ensure that you are off to a great start and have the tools that you need. Today, we will discuss some of the onboarding steps for first-time grantees, as well as returning grantees, and some entity roles and entity onboarding. Next, we will go through the steps of the application submission, which includes going through Grants.gov and how to locate and submit an application. Lastly, we will go over where to go for help as you navigate through the system and resources to help you as well. So now let's talk a little bit about onboarding. If you are new to JustGrants, here is a visual roadmap that can help you be aware of the steps needed to get through the grants process. Grantees will first want to obtain a DUNS number and receive confirmation of this. Once you have your DUNS number, you will want to then register with SAM.gov and also receive your confirmation from SAM.gov. Afterwards, you will need to get information from your Authorized Organization Representative, or AOR, from the eBiz point of contact. And now it's time to get to the grants. The grantees will need to search through Grants.gov and select the correct competition ID and get access to funding opportunity and application process from Grants.gov. Lastly, you will need to complete certain forms to finish the process. One of those forms you need to complete and submit is the SF424 and also the SFLLL through Grants.gov. Here's a roadmap for our returning users that can help you visualize each of the steps that are needed when you are onboarding. Once the entity administrator invites the users into Diamond, which is a part of JustGrants, the entity administrator will then assign roles for those users. The users will receive an email from Diamond and then need to successfully be logged into JustGrants. Here are some general takeaways and tips for the onboarding process. Entity administrators are the only users that are able to manage other users. This includes inviting new users to JustGrants, assigning roles, and assigning users to specific applications and awards. If you are already onboarded and the role of the application submitter to users before applying for funding opportunities in Grants.gov. Once invited to JustGrants, all users will receive a registration email. This email comes from the Diamond system. They must complete all steps in that email within 72 hours of receiving it, or it will expire. If the email expires, then the entity administrator can generate a new one for them to try to log back in. A user's email address will become their username. It is noted that if your email address has a hyphen, the system at this time does not accept it. So you may want to create an email address for JustGrants that does not include a hyphen. Each user will need to set up their own password within JustGrants. Users will also need to set up a multi-factor authentication as one of the steps in order to register. Every time a user logs into JustGrants, they need to click on a button that says send a code to their device or email. This button is a part of the login process and it is not automatic, so you have to click on send a code. Users will need to click this button to receive the code to complete logging in. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the roles that play a part in application submission. At this point, you should have identified your authorized users for JustGrants. Think about who will be working on your grants currently or in the future. Here are a list of those roles as of now that are available for you to assign to your users. Keep in mind that the users can be assigned multiple roles when you are assigning them. Once you have your list, you will go into Diamond through JustGrants and add each person and assign their roles. Once you've added them, please let them know that you've added them so they can be on the lookout for an email from Diamond. We created an entity user role matrix that has a breakdown of each role and how they work in JustGrants. This is available in a PDF format, and we will put the link to this in the chat so that you can have access to it after today's session. A user with the application submitter role will be the only person in JustGrants that will be able to submit an application. This person related to this role is automatically created when the application is submitted in Grants.gov. The person submitting the information in Grants.gov is assigned to the application in JustGrants. If this needs to change, the entity administrator can reassign this role in JustGrants as needed. The application submitter identifies the forms needed to submit an application, completes the web-based budget form, completes and certifies the application on behalf of your entity, and submits the application in JustGrants. If a member is assigned only the application submitter role, they will not be able to see funded awards in JustGrants. It is possible to assign multiple roles to the user with the application submitter role if that is what your organization prefers. The authorized representative is the person who is authorized to go into a legal agreement on behalf of the entity. The entity will need to designate who this person is because the entity will need to designate who this person is, and because that person will need to be selected from an existing user list. The entity administrator is also your eBiz point of contact. This person manages the users and their abilities in JustGrants. There can only be one entity administrator in JustGrants at a time. It would be best to know who you will need or who you will have as your backup entity administrator, maybe just in case that person may have to go on an extended vacation or medical leave. So we have this resource available to you about how the steps to go through entity management. The link has also will be also put into the chat so that you can research or have this more in your hand of the steps to go through entity management. We also have job aids available on this site as well, if you are the person who would like to have the paper for you to go through step by step. All right, so we'll go take our first quick break. And Chris, I'll go to you and see if there are any questions in the chat we need to address about entity and onboarding.
Stacey, so we have a couple questions. I know some of them were asked, and then I think you addressed them as you're going through the slides, but just to reemphasize, so one, just a general question, and at this point, I'm also going to introduce a couple of the people who might chime in to answer questions. So we have two experts on the line. So we have Amy Callahan and Amy Staubs. And so just a couple of the kind of general questions we have would be to emphasize, can an organization assign multiple people with the same role? For example, can there be more than one application submitter?
Hi, Chris. This is Amy Staubs. Yes, for an entity, you can invite as many users as is necessary to submit applications and to manage your awards, and each user can have many roles. They can have all roles if necessary. And so if you've got many people who are applying, many people can have the application submitter role. However, only one application submitter can be assigned to an application at a time. So the name entered in the 424 section F of who to contact regarding this application is going to be the person assigned to then finish the application once it is in the JustGrants system.
Great, thanks, Amy. And just to expand on that one last point you just mentioned, someone asked, for example, does that apply to other roles as well? For example, financial point of contact. And so it's one role per person per grant, or are there some places where someone could have multiple people in the same role?
A user can have many or all roles as required by the entity. We have small entities where there may be one or two people, so they have all roles. At this time, only one person can serve in that role for a specific application or for an award. So if I am the application submitter for application A, I am the only person who can put in, can input information or ultimately submit application A. If another person needs to touch that, my entity administrator needs to reassign it to that person. Only one person can be making edits, can be making changes at a time. That applies for applications as well as awards when we get post-award.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy. I think we've covered a number of the roles questions, the general roles questions. So Stacey, let's keep going.
Awesome, thank you so much. So now let's talk about the application submission process. So here we are at the application submission. This part of the grants lifecycle involves completing and submitting web-based forms, as well as the attachments that are required from the published solicitation. The process of submitting an application in JustGrants begins in Grants.gov. Once you have located a funding opportunity with DOJ, you will submit an SF-424. If you are applying for funding from the COPS office, you will submit a supplemental to the SF-424. An SFLLL is also submitted in Grants.gov. Aside from the SF-424 and the SFLLL, which are completed in Grants.gov, most of your application is entered into JustGrants. Your entity information is populated based upon entries made in SAM.gov and used in Grants.gov. You have two time periods within the system, within JustGrants and Grants.gov, that you need to be aware of. So there are two application submission deadlines. Make sure that you are aware and cognizant of both deadlines. One of the ways that JustGrants streamlines the process is that you are provided with the ability to use a web-based budget detail worksheet, and not only in this process more efficient, but it also establishes a shared structure and narrative for all of DOJ. Your organization, specifically your assigned entity administrator, has more control over users and award assignments and does not require intervention from DOJ to make those updates to these assignments. The entity administrator defaults to your organization's eBiz point of contact. So now let's get into the first steps of the process, and that's going through the application submission process through Grants.gov. Grants.gov is where you will go in order to find any federal funding opportunities and apply those funding options. Grants.gov has a wealth of tutorials and assistance to help you register and submit through the process. There will be two links that will be placed in the chat. One is for the Grants.gov help, and the second is a Grants.gov quick video, only 1 minute long, that'll help you visualize what you need to do in order to go through Grants.gov. Remember that you want to complete the two main steps when completing your application. First, you will need to find the funding opportunity and the application package. Once you have accessed an opportunity and submitted the SF-424 and the SFLLL in Grants.gov, you will receive two notifications from Grants.gov. The first confirms the receipt of the two forms, and the second will let you know whether the forms have been validated and successfully submitted. This should take no more than 48 hours following a submission. So if you don't see the forms, check your spam just in case. To search for an opportunity, use the Search Grants tab at the top of the page. You can filter the search to locate grants that are specific to your needs. You can look for grants by opportunity status, funding instrument type, eligibility, category, and agency. Take the time to review all of the options for each filter. Once you find an opportunity you would like to explore, select the opportunity number to view the requirements. Once you open the grant opportunity, review the information included in the synopsis, search history, related documents, and package tabs to see if this opportunity is the one that would benefit your organization. If you choose to apply, select the Apply button, and you will need to log in and create a Grants.gov account to apply. Keep in mind that the person's name and email that you put into Section F on the SF424 form is the name of the role that we spoke of earlier called the application submitter. The application submitter is the only person who can complete the application in JustGrants. If you want to change the application submitter, then the entity administrator will need to reassign this role after it's been submitted in Grants.gov. So it's important to remember that whatever name you put here on this form in Section F is the person of the application submitter. When you're submitting your application, please only push the Submit button once. If you submit it multiple times, it will create duplicate submissions. In this scenario, you will be asked to delete or withdraw any of the duplicates before you can continue. Be aware that just because you receive a confirmation that your application has been received, you may also receive a notification that your application has been rejected. Confirmation of the application does not mean it has been approved. When it comes to your SF424 and SFLLL, it is best to have those documents completed way before the deadline so that if there are any changes or updates that are needed, you can get those in so it doesn't cause for a rejection. The grantee will receive a tracking number that will connect JustGrants to your application. That way, the system knows that the application and grant belongs to you. So now that we've gone through what to do in Grants.gov, we will now talk about the steps for JustGrants. There are certain web-based forms that must be submitted directly into the system, such as your proposal abstract and solicitation. For those who are returning users, you will also need to submit your goals, objectives, deliverables, and timeline just like before. Make sure your budget information is included in the budget detail form. And lastly, your disclosure of duplication and the cost item. Now I will turn it over to Lisa Hartman, who will walk us through the steps in JustGrants about application submission.
Thank you, Stacy. First, I'd like to walk through a demo on how to locate an application in JustGrants. Typically, you'll find an application in JustGrants within 24 hours of submitting the SF424 and SFLLL from Grants.gov. So when you log into JustGrants, this is the page that everyone will see at first. It's the home page. All users begin here upon login. It's important to know, just as an FYI, that JustGrants works best in Chrome or Edge browsers. Internet Explorer is not an optimal option if that's what you're used to using. From the home page in JustGrants, you will see the My Work List section right here in the main area here. The My Work List section is a list of all tasks that are assigned directly to you. The application submitter will see the application that was transferred from Grants.gov on this list. Again, it can take up to 24 hours for this transfer to take place. It is not immediate. You can use the column headers to sort and filter your list if you need to. Each of the column headers, when you click, will either sort in ascending or descending order based on the content of that column. And notice also there are these little triangular filter options which allow you to open and select a particular filter option for that column header. For the applications, you're looking for a grant package, case type, and we're looking for a pending draft status. So as you can see, we're filtering here, and all of these are already pending draft statuses. So this is the list of applications that are available for submission in JustGrants. If you're looking, you'll notice that all the grant package case IDs start with the letter A. The numbers that follow are match the tracking ID in Grants.gov. So you should be able to line up the application that you're looking for based on the tracking ID from Grants.gov. As we start in My Work List, if we open the grant package from here, you'll be able to open and begin editing your application immediately. If, on the other hand, you are going to open the application from the left-hand side of the screen under the Applications menu, you're going to see all the applications that are assigned both to you and to any other application submitter in your organization. So if you're going to open from the Applications menu on the left, you're going to need to take an additional step in order to edit and submit your application. When you open from the Applications menu and you select the application ID, which is the link to open, we'll open here this in a moment, you will see at the top of the page the Standard Applicant Information ScreenFlow task, and at the very right you see a Begin or an Open button. In order to view the application and edit the application, you'll need to click that Begin button. This is very important. If you don't click the Begin button, you will be in read-only mode and will be unable to take any action. If you don't see the Begin button, this application is not assigned to you. If it needs to be assigned to you, you'll need to contact your entity administrator to reassign it to you. So once we click the Begin button, then it will open the application, and it will allow you then to view all the steps that you're going to need to take and view the entire application itself. So that is the demo on how to locate an application and how to use the home page. So now I'd like to move on, and I'd like to talk about how to submit the application. So again, starting in the My Work List section, we're going to locate the application you'd like to submit. And because we're starting in the My Work List, in the Work List section and not the Applications menu, the application is going to open in edit mode, and it's going to allow you to edit right away. You won't have to click the Begin button in order to start. So again, starting from the home page, the My Work List section, this is the most efficient way to open your applications. If you don't see the application in the My Work List section, it is not assigned to you. So I'd like to take just a quick look at how the application is laid out and the information that you can find here. And the first page that you're going to open in the application is the Standard Applicant Information section. I'd like to show you on the right here, you see a list of sections on the right. All of these sections will be opened individually, and you'll need to enter the specific information in each section, and we'll go through these here in this demo. Notice above the list of application sections, there's a link to the solicitation instructions. If you would like to have those on hand so that you are sure that you are satisfying the requirements in the solicitation, you can open that and you can view it or print it, whatever you need to do in order to have that at hand. In the Standard Applicant section, We have information on the funding opportunity at the top of the page. We have the CFDA information or the account information, and then we have project information. These fields, some of them are editable, so they are coming to you from the Grants.gov entry. If you need to make adjustments to them, you can do that. Right below the project information, there's a field titled Areas Affected by Project, Cities, Counties, States, etc. This is a field that will accept zip codes for the areas that your project will cover. In the application, you can add up to 10 zip codes. If you need to add more and your application becomes a funded award, you'll be able to add additional zip codes in the funded award. But for the application purpose, it's limited to 10. Right below the header, the areas affected by project, etc., there's an add button. And this add button is where you're able to enter individual zip codes. And again, you can add up to 10 in the application itself. Notice a little trash can on the right that allows you to delete an entry if you have made an entry error. So once you have entered the areas affected by the project, which by the way is a required field, we can scroll down and see additional information that is populated from the SF424 and from the Grants.gov application process itself. You can make changes here as needed. And then we can roll down and see the type of applicant. Again, coming from Grants.gov, you can make changes here as needed, or they can remain populated as they are. But all of this information is coming from the Grants.gov entries that you made. So we'll scroll back up to the top, and we'll take a look now at the Confirm Authorized Rep page. So again, as Stacy said, the authorized representative is the person who is qualified to enter into a legal agreement with the Department of Justice and must be added to the application in order to submit it. So this authorized representative will need to have been invited to be a member in JustGrants and will need to be an active member in order to appear on the list of the drop-down list of representatives that are appearing. In this particular example, we're looking at a COPS office application, and we can tell that because there are actually 2 authorized representatives that are going to be required. In most other solicitations from OJP or OVW, OVC, we will not need to have 2, they'll be limited to 1. So let's take a look at how this works. We're going to go ahead and from the drop-down menu, select the authorized representative, and then click the Confirm Authorized Representative button. It's as easy as that. And you can see that that information then is populated below in the Confirmed Authorized Representative. So the next section we're going to take a look at is to verify the legal name, doing business as, and legal address section. This is does not contain any information that is editable. All of this information was transferred through Grants.gov from SAM.gov. So your SAM.gov entity information does flow through into JustGrants. If anything here is incorrect or needs to be adjusted, your eBiz POC will need to visit SAM.gov and make the updates there. Typically, it will take about 24 hours for those updates to appear in JustGrants. So again, verify that all of this information is correct. After the verify local name and address, the next section that we're going to see is the proposal abstract. Notice that we can actually click in the menu to the right. We can click around. We don't have to go in a linear order, although that is the way we're managing this demo today. There's also a continue button at the bottom that will take you to the next section as well. The proposal abstract is a text entry field, and I'd like to draw your attention to the red asterisk that follows the words proposal abstract. That red asterisk, everywhere you see it in JustGrants, indicates a required field. You will not be able to submit this application without an entry in this field. So the proposal abstract field is a free entry text field. You can copy and paste from a Word document if you've already prepared this, or you can type directly in the field if that's your preference. Notice at the top of the text field that there are some formatting options. Typically, when you copy and paste from a Word document, it will copy most of the formatting into this field, although you may need to make a couple of adjustments. It's worth looking through it just to make sure it looks the way you want it to look.
Would you mind pausing real quick for some questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Great, thanks, Lisa. So I know we're seeing a lot of questions related to the geographic area. So I'm going to pivot a question over to Amy. So if an applicant is going to be submitting an application that covers a wide range of areas, state, perhaps even nationally, how should they approach reflecting that in the application through JustGrants?
Users can type in national in one of the boxes, so they should be able to submit with national as indicated in the affected areas data field.
Okay, and if it's somewhere between a single or 10 zip codes and national, to say if it's a statewide project?
They should be able to type in state as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I think that was a big chunk of the questions we were getting, so I think we wanted to pause and address that before we got too much further. So I think skimming through the questions at this point. And one thing just to mention, because I know we've gotten a couple of questions about it. So after this session, both the slides and the recording of the session will be made available on the JustGrants website within the next few days, and then additional resources will be coming as well. So, I know we're going through a lot of content right now, and you're getting a lot of information, but all this information will be made available on the JustGrants website as well in the days to come. So. I think we can probably dive back in, Lisa, and kind of take some breaks as we go.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. I'll try and pause every now and again and see if there are any questions that come up as we go through a couple of sections at a time.
Sounds great, thank you.
All right, no problem. So after the proposal abstract section, we're going to come to the proposal narrative. In this section, it's recommended that you upload a document. It's pretty straightforward to do that. When you click the upload button here, and you can upload more than one, when you click the upload button, it will allow you to either drag and drop a file or search your workstation for a file and then attach it. Very, very straightforward. Works like many, many other applications. You also have the option here to enter your goals, objectives, deliverables, and timeline. So to the left side of the screen, in the center here, there's a little link that says plus new goal. When you click that, it opens up the opportunity for you to enter the goal statement, and all of these are required once you're going to enter a goal. You enter the goal statement in text format. You can also then add objectives. And again, on the right side of the objectives line, there's a plus new objective option. And then you can add as many objectives as apply. On the right below that for deliverables, you see the little plus new deliverables option. And again, you can add as many as apply. So again, this is the option for adding your goals, objectives, deliverables, etc. You can enter multiple goals as you need. And at the bottom, once you've finished entering all of the goals, the statements, the objectives, and the deliverables, then you can click the Add button, and that will add that new goal to your application. If you're not ready to add that just yet, you can click Save and come back to this and finish it a little bit later. Or if you choose to cancel, you can cancel, and that will remove anything you might have entered already and reset the application to the point where it was before you started to make this entry. So we'll just take a quick look here at that. I'll give you a moment to absorb this screen. Notice a little trash can there. If you had created a goal and you wanted to remove it, the trash can icon allows you to do that. Now we're going to look a little bit at the budget detail worksheet, and it's important to know that the application sections that you see here are taken directly from the solicitation. Different applications may have different sections. Different offices may have different requirements, for instance, for their budget detail worksheet. Again, because this is a budget, this is an application from the COPS office, there are categories in the budget detail worksheet that might not apply to other offices. The first one, the sworn officer, is one of those. So, but other offices may have different sections as well. You'll just need to react to them as you see them. So in this particular case, there is the opportunity to enter position title, sworn officer, with a description. You're also able, if you look here below position, there's the option to enter the salary, fringe benefits, summary totals, and the like. And again, that's just for a particular COPS office budget category. We'll move on. We'll take a look at some of these other budget categories. We'll go through little bit by little bit. So the COPS office also has civilian personnel. Many other applications might have just personnel, staff members, where you enter salary information and the like. The travel section of the budget detail worksheet allows you to enter, and notice again at the top, every time you see this plus add item, you're able to add an additional line. You can add as many lines to the application budget items as you need. And if you have added too many or added one in error, you can delete as well. So in the travel section of the budget detail worksheet, you can add the purpose of the travel, location, type of expense, whether it's hotel, rental car, and the like, the basis and the cost, the quantity, number of staff, number of trips, total cost. You can enter the non-federal contribution and the federal request. Below, as you continue your entries, you'll notice that that JustGrants will begin to calculate your total travel cost, your non-federal contribution, and the federal request automatically as you make your entries, every time you save a line. There is an additional narrative field below. You're highly encouraged and should enter information to explain in text the narrative behind the budget detail that you're working with. So after travel, we can move into taking a look at equipment. So we'll take a look at equipment. And again, if your project is going to require any equipment purchases, this is where you can enter that information. That went very fast. You can also do supply items. So travel, equipment, supply items, and again, like equipment with supply items, you would indicate the purpose of the supply items, the number of items, the unit cost, the total cost, non-federal contribution, and federal request. And again, notice that the totals are going to be automatically calculated. And again, please provide additional narratives as suggested. The next option we have to look at are the subawards. And you can add, or subgrants, you can add here description, purpose, consultant, country, state, U.S. territory, city, total cost, non-federal contribution, and federal request. And again, the totals will appear below. You can also indicate if you need to add consultant travel. as part of your subawards. And again, please do fill out the additional narrative as needed. So again, you click the Add Item, and it would allow you to begin entry. You can delete an item as you need to. Procurement contacts and other costs here are additional entries that you might need to make. You can add or delete items as needed. Again, this works very similarly to the other budget detail worksheet categories. Indirect costs are added here, item as individual items. You can add an indirect cost item here, and you'll need to provide a description, a base amount for that item, the indirect cost rate, total cost, non-federal contribution, and federal request. And then at the bottom, you'll be able to add additional narrative that describes all of the indirect cost items that you would be adding. The budget summary screen will display the total costs that you have currently calculated based on the entries that you've created previously on the budget detail worksheet. If there's a total local share amount, you can enter that here on the bottom of the summary. But this will then provide you with, the total costs that you've entered so far. At the end of the budget detail worksheet, we have the ability to add a number of different types of files to upload. Notice you have all of these different options here. You have pre-agreement costs, you have non-competitive justification, indirect cost rate agreement, consultant rate justifications. Each of these is accessed by opening a little caret to the left of the title. And then within that, you can upload the documents that are specific to that type of budget attachment. So the upload is pretty straightforward, and this works like almost every upload in the system. You can either drag and drop or select the file from your workstation and click Attach, and you've uploaded it. You can upload multiple documents as needed. The Memoranda of Understanding, or MOUs, and other supportive documents are uploaded as file attachments, just like we saw previously. And again, you can upload multiple documents as needed. Then we also have additional application components. In this case, we have, notice the red asterisks. It looks like there's a requirement in this particular application for these documents to be uploaded. There's a curriculum vitae, tribal authorizing resolution, letters of support, and then there are additional attachments as well as needed. And again, we open the caret to the left to expose the upload button so that you can upload that particular document type. Next, we have the disclosure of lobbying activities. So this is actually, I believe, the SFLLL. So if it had been entered in the in Grants.gov, this should appear here in the application already. There are additional disclosures of duplication, disclosures and insurances that we can review. So in this case, we have the disclosure of duplication and cost items, which is really a radio button selection, yes or no. We have the certified standard assurances here that can be read through and accepted. Again, certifications regarding lobbying. And then we have another category here in which you can upload other disclosures and assurances as required. At the end is a declaration and certification as to this applicant's application submission. You'll want to read through it, and at the bottom of the text, you'll see a little checkbox that says, I agree with the above statements. So this is something that you would need to agree to, and it will then apply your name and a time and date stamp as to when you agree to that. Finally, there's a category for other in which you might upload documents that have not had a good place to be uploaded so far, but you can upload additional documents here as needed. And once you've finished all of the information that you intend to include in the application, the very last section is the Certify and Submit section. And it's here that you can kind of review everything that you've entered. Again, the little carrots to the left of the topics here allow you to open that topic and read through what you entered. So you have one last sort of review page to take a look at the application before you're ready to send it. At the bottom of this section, there's a little final review and certification of application confirmation checkbox. And again, that is the indicator that you are certifying the information and you're prepared to submit. So we'll take a look there. You can see which ones are required based on the red asterisks. We'll check that little box. And if you notice down the bottom right-hand corner, now there's a submit button. Previously, that was continues as you moved from one section to another. Before we submit, I'd like to draw your attention again to the menu option on the right, and you'll notice that we have these green check marks that are appearing every time you've opened a section. It should be noted those green check marks do not mean that it's complete. It just means that you've opened it to view. All right, let's take a look at what it looks like when we certify and submit. All right. Notice, by the way, that you can save this application and come back later. You don't have to enter and move through this and submit in one option. There are a number of validations that happen once you submit your application. If, for instance, you've missed a required field, or if some of the totals in the budget detail worksheet don't match the federal funding total, then you're going to get some error messages. The error messages are fairly clear to let you know which sections you need to go back to review and where you might be missing information or have incorrect information. So once those validations are cleared, you'll be able to submit and your application will be sent to the Department of Justice. All right, Stacey, I'm going to turn this back over to you, unless there perhaps are any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll go through these quick slides right quick, and then we'll get to some questions. So let's talk about after you've submitted your application. You're probably wondering what's next. So once all the application for the solicitation has been reviewed, then the entity will be notified, which will all happen before September 30th. Every user in JustGrants should take the time to check the system on a regular basis in order to be aware of any deadlines of information they need related to the grant. Please remember who your entity administrator and authorized representatives are, for they will be notified when the deadline for applications will be changed. The system will also notify the application submitter, entity administrator, any authorized representative when the application has been received in JustGrants from Grants.gov. And the entity administrator will receive notification on when the award has been sent. If you don't receive the notification, please make sure you check your spam folder, because a lot of times we're noticing that it's ending in that folder. So make sure they check that before they say that they did not get it, and reach out to JustGrants for support. So now I'll turn it back over to Chris, because I know we probably have a lot of questions at this time to address.
We do. So thanks, Stacey. So I know we've gotten a lot of questions, and some of these we're going to try to summarize the questions. So if we don't ask your specific question with your specific wording, keep your ears out, because we might be paraphrasing slightly to bundle a few questions together. So Amy, we've gotten a number of questions related to, for example, like character or word limits in different fields in the application. So for example, are there character limits in the abstract? Are there character limits in different goals and objectives? So can you speak to, one, do those exist? And two, how might applicants know what they are or how they're going to hit them?
So for the project abstract in the system, there isn't a character limit. However, the solicitations, at least for OJP, do provide you parameters as to how long the proposal abstract should be. So you would need to review your solicitation and ensure that you are meeting the requirements as stated within the solicitation. For the goals and objectives, I do think that there is maybe a 500 character limit within the goals, as well as the objectives, and the deliverables are a drop-down selection. So you will not be able to type a specific goal. It will be from the drop-down selection. In the budget detail, there is not a limit in the narrative that you have to explain your line items above. Within the different line items, I think there are some character limits based on what type of budget line item you're adding, whether it be a construction or an equipment. So there are some character limits in there, and the system will provide those validations while you're within the budget worksheet.
Great, thanks, Amy. So I know we've also gotten a couple questions around the goals, objectives, and deliverables. So are those fields always required in addition to uploading a narrative attachment?
No, those would be based on the requirements outlined in your solicitation.
Okay, so applicants should always look to the solicitation.
Correct.
Okay. We also have a number of questions related to the budget detail worksheet. So, for example, is it required to use the budget detailed worksheet and enter in the different fields? Alternately, are applicants able to upload budget attachments instead, like Excel documents or PDF?
For solicitations that are using the web-based budget form, it will be a required field. There are some solicitations, like formula solicitations, who would be attaching a budget.
Okay. So a question coming back towards it's kind of the intersection of roles and then completing the application. So only one person can submit the application, that would be the application submitter, but can other people help contribute to entering information into the application, for example, in the budget field?
No, at this time, the application submitter would be completing the budget fields as well.
Okay.
And I'll just add that if there is a need for a different person to do different parts of the application, then that would require reassignment. So application submitter 1 should go ahead and complete all of the application that they're responsible for. And in order to hand the baton to someone else to do the budget, that will have to be reassigned. And then a second application submitter can come in and make further edits.
Thanks, Amy. And so, yeah, so to emphasize there can't be 2 application submitters at once, but the role can be passed from person to person as needed by the organization.
Yes.
Great. So we've gotten a few questions about the saving function within the application and whether JustGrants auto-saves, whether applicants must manually save, and if it's and how to make sure they don't inadvertently lose work that they've been putting into the different fields.
So JustGrants will save if you are on any of the navigation links on the left. On your right. It saves when you hit the continue button, and then it saves when you hit the save button. So if you're in a screen like the proposal abstract and you are going to leave the system, I would definitely save before you leave the system, or navigate to another part of the application so that what you have inserted in the proposal abstract has been saved.
Great, thank you. So we've gotten a few questions about, I'm trying to figure out to save this one to the end or not, but we'll ask it now. So it's around the printing and saving. So is it possible at different points when working on an application to either save the fields, export them, or as people are going through, or at the end to export a copy of the application for the organization's own records?
So at this time, we don't have the ability to print. And at this time, we don't have the ability to see an application once it has been submitted. I know that we are currently working on enhancements, and we're hoping to release those in the very near future.
Okay, thank you. And for organizations which are already recipients of DOJ funding and have successfully applied in the past, can they see previous applications in JustGrants?
So if you submitted an application in 2020, no, you will not be able to see the previous application that you submitted. If you have submitted, you will be able to see the applications that are submitted currently. So for the 2021 application life cycle.
Okay. So we have a question around what the so the certification and submission. So once you certify and submit, does that complete the application and it's fully submitted to DOJ, or will it require further certification from another user, such as the authorized rep?
No, once you submit, it is submitted to DOJ.
Okay. So we have a couple kind of tactical questions around best practices. So just from experience, do you find that it's better to write and type and draft in the different fields in the system, or is it better to cut and paste into, like, write elsewhere and cut and paste into the field?
I mean, I think that is up to the individual user. It would, I think I would prefer to draft the proposal abstract outside of the system and then just come in and cut and paste. I think that would probably be easier from my perspective. And then I think for your budget, you would have like an Excel spreadsheet, and you would have started to work through all of those different line items well before coming into the system and inserting the information.
Great, thanks, Amy. So at this point, I want to kind of check in and turn it back over to Stacy and see if we want to continue into any additional content, or if we want to continue with questions.
We can continue in the content and then come back to the questions if that helps.
Let's do that.
Okay, no problem. So now we've given you a lot of information. So we're going to kind of now turn it over to some resources so that you know where to go if you need help as you go through the process. So here are a few tools that can help you get started and make sure that you want to make sure that you're checking your emails for information and updates as you go through this transition. If you're not getting any emails, if you go to the link that's on the bottom of the screen here, the JustGrants.usdoj.gov, and click on the news and updates screen, it will bring you to a place where you can sign up for those emails so you can have the most current up-to-date information about what's happening with JustGrants in the system. And also the link on the slide here brings you to everything that you see here on the screen. So we have a checklist for those who want to make sure that they have everything they need when they're getting started. All of our training materials are located here. News and updates, as I stated. Any FAQs, the questions you may have. Sometimes a lot of the questions that are asked here during the sessions are already on our FAQs. We have an about section about JustGrants, and also, of course, our user support. If you're experiencing any difficulties with Grants.gov or SAM.gov, you can contact the Grants.gov customer support hotline or the SAM help desk. Also, the applicants experiencing difficulties with JustGrants can contact the JustGrants support desk at justgrants.support@usadoj.gov or at 833-872-5175, Monday through Friday between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and Saturday and Sunday and federal holidays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I'll just leave this here for a second so you can write down that number or email address if you need to. We can also put the links in the chat if that is helpful as well. So if you do have to reach out to the help desk, we ask that you make sure you have gathered as much information as possible in order for the help desk to be able to help you. So here are a list of those items that are really helpful when you are reaching out to the help desk. So when you get this slide deck as a reference for later, you'll have all the things here that you can just say, okay, I need to make sure I have all of these things before I reach out, so that way they can get me an answer as quick as possible. So before we wrap up for the day and before we get back to the Q&A, I just want to kind of give a few more additional resources for help. As I stated before, we have the FAQ that is available. That you have. We also have it broken up into different topics based upon those frequently asked questions. We have learning materials that are related specifically just to application submission. We have links that you can go to Grants.gov, also SAM.gov, and then also our training support email, which is JustGrants training support at usdoj.gov. At the end of this session, there will be an evaluation form. We ask that you complete this before you leave the session, so that way we can make sure that we can continue to bring quality sessions. So next slide, please. And Chris, I'll turn it back over to you so we can go through a few more questions.
Thanks, Stacy. So we know we have a number of additional questions here. So I'm looking back through the list. A very tactical question related to the budget detail worksheet. So is the indirect base amount automatically calculated by the budget detail worksheet in JustGrants?
I believe the indirect cost rate is calculated. I may need to go back in and double check that.
I can confirm that.
Okay.
That's one of the benefits about the web-based budget form, is that it does do the calculations. And so to make sure that there is no errors in that math. And then ultimately, if your application is accepted for award, that information is already in the system and will help streamline some post-award activities.
Great, thanks, Amy and Amy. So another question, and I think this is coming from the perspective of an entity or an organization that has already received DOJ funding in the past. So looking to clarify, is an extension request on a current award the same as a new application? Or do you file an extension request from the original application or separately?
And an extension on a current award?
I believe that is the question, yes.
That would be a grant extension through the grant modification process for the funded awards. A new grant does not automatically extend an award.
Thanks for clarifying that. And to the person who asked the question, I saw, like, will there be separate training on grant extension? I'll highlight that on the JustGrants website, you'll find resources on grant award modifications, which would be the process by which to extend a currently active award. Another question on the budget detailed worksheet. So if somebody, if an applicant completes the web-based form, fills out all the fields, is it necessary to attach a budget worksheet as well, or is completing the web-based form sufficient?
Completing the web-based form is sufficient.
Okay. So coming back to the relationship between Grants.gov and JustGrants. So if an applicant enters a project title in Grants.gov, can the applicant later update that title in JustGrants?
Yes.
A project title?
Yeah, the project title was the way the question was phrased.
Yes, they can update that in JustGrants.
Okay, and a similar question also received was if the areas affected by the project file was uploaded and attached with the 424, is that still require putting in zip codes into JustGrants?
Yes, it is. We are trying to collect the zip codes within our system.
Okay. Looking for, I know we have questions, so we're just trying to sift through them. Thanks everyone for your patience. So I think we've gotten a few questions around the validation and making sure that people are clear on how that manifests. So it sounds like is there or is there not a validation button function prior to hitting submission, or how would people know, maybe just to recap again, how would people know if there were errors that the system was detecting in an application before they hit submit? What would that look like?
So there's two types of error messages. When you are completing the budget form, within the budget form, you may have and receive error messages when you try to navigate between the different sections. When you hit the submit button, your entire application will go through a second set of validations. And at the top of the screen, you will see all of the errors that you may have missed within your application.
And Amy, you can help me confirm, as a applicant submitter works through the navigation on that right-hand menu through each section of the application, if you've answered all of the boxes and they look okay, there's a green check mark that shows up next to that section, isn't there?
No, that green check mark is only used to show that you've gone into the section.
Another question, so a question about clarifying again that relationship between Grants.gov and JustGrants. So I think we mentioned a little earlier about, there's the ability to update the budget amount submitted in Grants.gov in JustGrants later on. So can you speak a little bit more about just perhaps a little generally about what can and cannot change after the initial submission in Grants.gov, and what can and cannot be changed in JustGrants after it's moved over into the JustGrants system?
So in JustGrants, in Grants.gov, you're only submitting the 424 and the SFLLL. So the 424 does require you to state what your requested amount of funds is that you are requesting. You would be able to come into JustGrants and update those data fields within JustGrants. So you'll be able to adjust the funding amount that you are requesting. You will be able to adjust the project title, and you can also adjust the type of applicant you are. But those are the only two items that we are that are being submitted within JustGrants.
Yes, the one data element that you cannot change once you are in JustGrants is the DUNS number. That association of what legal entity is applying for funds is locked, is married at the time you submit from Grants.gov. So if you get into the application and decide that, oh, that's the wrong DUNS number, that's not the legal entity that is intending to apply, then you need to start over again in Grants.gov.
Thanks, Amy. And Amy, so I think we're still getting a number of questions, and I think to the extent possible, we can kind of just break it down around the zip codes and the geographic coverage. So as we stated earlier, if it's a project that has national scope or an application that has national scope, it's possible to enter national, and that if it's statewide, covering an entire state, it's possible to enter state. But how should applicants handle it if, for example, they're covering 2 cities in a state, or they're covering kind of several groupings of areas that total to more than 10 zip codes, but might still be somewhat hard to describe in a one-word description, like state or national?
I think go ahead and add the 10 zip codes, and then you can provide an attachment in another category or in the other section of the application to provide additional information.
Okay, so they should, and because I think this was a specific question at one point, so they should pick a sample of 10 of the zip codes they would be covering, and then add an attachment to provide a description of the rest of the geographic area.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and most likely their narrative will will be laying out their intended impact in the communities that they seek to serve.
Great, Amy. Thanks. That's a good clarification. So back to the budget forms briefly. So is it possible to download the budget forms, or are budget forms available somewhere to use as working documents prior to entering the information into JustGrants?
No, we don't have the budget form available. I think you could go and use the current PDF form as a guide that would help you in filling out the budget form in JustGrants.
Okay, thank you. So now we have some people looking for specific recommendations. Since understanding that there is no print function as of this moment in JustGrants, so what would DOJ recommend for applicants to do to get a copy outside of the system for their records of some kind? Like what is there a workaround that applicants could follow? What might they do?
So the majority of the program narrative is going to be an attachment. So you would be able to have all of the attachments that you had within that you are submitting. You can do screenshots of your application that you are filling out, which I realize is not ideal, but you would be able to do some screenshots of the web-based forms, so you can have that. I think that would be the workaround that I would think of at this time.
Okay, so taking screenshots and saving those for the organization's records. All right. So we have a question around application submission deadlines and changes in those deadlines. So if DOJ changes the application submission deadline for a specific solicitation, will that date then update in JustGrants? And if so, will everything be able to continue, or will the date be locked in JustGrants? And just what happens basically if the solicitation deadline changes?
If the deadline changes, if the deadline changes, JustGrants will adjust their deadlines as well, and you will be able to submit your application up until the extended deadline. I do know that there is a bug currently that will hopefully be fixed this Friday, where there are incorrect due dates being displayed in some of the views externally.
Great. Thanks, Amy. So one question we have, and again, this is kind of one of those tactical system questions. Is there a file size or attachment file size limitation to attachments which would be uploaded to the application?
I can speak to that. Our software has a maximum file size of 25 megabytes for each individual file.
Okay, so each file, 25 megabytes.
Yes.
Thanks for that. Okay. So a question around kind of font compatibility and formatting. So if working to do, say, for example, an abstract and drafting that outside of JustGrants, when copying and pasting it in, will all the formatting, say bullet points or fonts or italics or things like that, will those all disappear when pasting into JustGrants, or should the formatting be retained?
No, the formatting will be retained. When I've cut and pasted into JustGrants, there have been a few times where there were extra spaces. So I do recommend you review it again, but the formatting is all there.
Great, thanks. So there's a question, and it just scrolled past it. So is there a view, I guess I'm trying to interpret the question here. It's saying, is there a view, understanding that screenshots might be the way to capture and pull down the information in JustGrants until the print function is developed later on, is there a way to see a list of all the attachments in one place so that it's possible to confirm what those attachments are and what has been uploaded?
So on the certification screen, you have a list of all of the components of the application, and then there is a caret within those within that screen to expand the different application components, and you should see a listing of all of your attachments within that view.
Okay. Thank you for that. So we have someone offering a recommendation, but it's a good thing to just also check as well. So someone said, I've noticed in JustGrants that if you have problems uploading attachments, try changing the file name and then uploading. So for me, the question behind that is, are there certain characters or alphanumeric symbols which would prevent something from successfully uploading to JustGrants, for example, quotation marks or something like that?
No, I am not aware of any character limitations, or if you have the same name for an attachment, you will not be able to attach a second document with the same name.
Okay, so no two files with the same file name.
Correct.
And then there was a question earlier around whether if through the course of submitting an application, an applicant wishes to delete an attachment and re-upload an updated version, how might they go about doing that?
So you have a trash can next to your attachment, and if you click on the trash can, you should be able to delete it, and then you can upload a new attachment.
Okay. A question just to clarify, I'll say it again. So the file size limitation for any attachment, any single attachment to JustGrants is 25 megabytes. Another question around kind of formatting, if a report or a copy and paste up into JustGrants has a hyperlink, will that hyperlink carry into JustGrants, or will they need to include the full expanded HTML web address, not just the click here type hyperlink?
The hyperlinks have, you can cut and paste a hyperlink. You can also insert a hyperlink in the within the text, at least within the proposal abstract data field.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. So we have approximately 1 minute left in our time. So with that, we're going to unfortunately have to stop answering the immediate questions at this point. But first of all, we want to thank everyone who attended, because these questions are invaluable. They are invaluable to us to know what questions are out there. And as Stacy mentioned earlier, this helps us update our resources, and we are consistently looking to do that. So to emphasize again, the JustGrants website will serve as a hub for information and resources on using JustGrants. And the application submission training page currently contains an extensive job aid and a video which will walk you through the process. We suggest that you bookmark that page, the application submission training page, and check back often, since more resources are going to be coming soon, including the materials from this webinar. To make it easier for you to find and bookmark that page, when you leave this WebEx session, WebEx will prompt you to actually open that page automatically in a new tab on your internet browser. So hopefully you'll land on that page as soon as you leave this session. Also, when you leave the WebEx session today, a second tab will open containing a brief evaluation survey. We sincerely hope that you'll be willing to provide us with feedback on this session so that we can ensure that future iterations of this session and any other JustGrants sessions going forward can best meet your needs as DOJ applicants and/or funding recipients. So thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this session useful and that you feel better prepared to submit an application to the Department of Justice using Grants.gov and JustGrants. And that will conclude this webinar. Thank you all again, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.